Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me acknowledge yourself and your co-host. Let me acknowledge the Premier of our province, Ntate David Makura, MEC Mbali Shope, and our colleagues in the provincial government, especially our cabinet members. Let me acknowledge the members of the Gauteng legislature, the women of our province, distinguished guests, and our beautiful women. I'm saying to you, Malibongwe igama lamakhosikazi. Let me appreciate the opportunity to present this keynote address at this year's Gauteng's Provincial Government Women's Day celebration. The year of 2021 marks the 65th anniversary of the Women's March to the Union Buildings and also the 150th anniversary of the birth of our liberation struggle icon and human rights campaigner, Me Charlotte Manye Mateke. In her honor, we celebrate the role she played in the women's movement, fighting for the African women's rights. Me Charlotte was courageous and an outstanding leader of our glorious movement, the African National Congress, and founder of the Bantu Women's League. An iconic and colossal doyen who was at the forefront in the fight against the colonial rule and the apartheid regime. It is therefore befitting that we celebrate this year's Women's Month under the theme, the Year of Charlotte Mateke, Gauteng Realizing Women's Equality. Program Director, during this month of August, which is the Women's Month, we pay tribute to the pioneers of that famous March of 1956. We honor Me Margaret Gazo, Me Lileni Ngoyi, Me Helen Joseph, Me Albertina Sisulu, and Dr. Sophie Tibrain. We also recognize the role played by other scores of women whose names do not always find expression when we talk about this Women's March of 1956. Bomme like Me Betha Klowa, Bore Alexander, Caroline Mutwaledi, Dora Tamane, Dorothy Nyembe, Florence Maposho, Hilda Beinstein, and many others who went around the country collecting signatures for that petition. Let me also acknowledge and appreciate even the role that was played by Me Rahima Musa in making sure that she also mobilizes more women. That famous march, which was organized and led by these women to the Union Buildings, theirs was to present a petition to the then Prime Minister Stradom. The aforementioned women are amongst those who paved the way for women emancipation and gender equality. Ours is to continue where they left off and ensure that their efforts are not in vain. Women's Month allows us to gauge how far we have come in transforming our society, particularly the transformation of unequal power relations between women and men. It is indeed a suitable moment to focus on highlighting the chronic plight of gender oppression, patriarchy, sexism, racism, ageism, structural oppression, as well as reimagining improved and better ways of combating the toxic social environment which denies women their constitutional right to define themselves. Our government continues to uphold their constitutional responsibility, especially of protecting, promoting, and advancing the rights of women. South Africa forms part of the Global Generational Equality Campaign, which pursues intergenerational partnerships to eliminate gender inequality. The Generation Equality Forum, which was recently held in Paris from the 30th of June to the 2nd of July, announced bold and gender equality commitments culminating into the launch of the Global 5-Year Action Plan to accelerate gender equality by 2026. The Generation Equality Action Coalition takes on 6 critical issues that underpin gender equality. The first one being gender-based violence, the second one being economic justice and rights, the third one being bodily autonomy and sexual reproductive health and rights, the fourth one being feminist action for climate justice, the fifth one being technology and innovation for gender equality, and the last one being the feminist movement and leadership. As the Gauteng provincial government, we must adopt the Global Acceleration Plan for Gender Equality and implement it alongside alongside our gender-based violence response plan. The sixth generation equality critical issues which underpin gender equality also mirror the Women's Charter, the challenges to effective equality, namely law and administration of justice, economy, education and training, development, infrastructure and the environment, social services, political and civic life, family life and partnership, customs, culture and religion, violence against women, health and media. In the book titled The Handmaid's Tale by the Canadian novelist Mary Margaret Atwood, she wrote, and I quote, "There is more than one kind of freedom. Freedom to and freedom from." I close quote. For us to realize women's equality, women and girls must be free. Free to be elected into positions of power without restriction or discrimination. We know that the rules of game, they change when it is the turn of women to ascend into positions of power, and that needs to change. Free to access full opportunities for employment with equal opportunities. Free to enjoy equal rights with men, and free from poverty, unemployment, gender-based violence, discriminatory social norms, laws and practices that hold them back and stifle their potential. The COVID-19 pandemic has also restricted the strides made in the empowerment of women. The pandemic is further deepening pre-existing inequalities, exposing the vulnerability of women in social, political, and economic systems, which are in turn amplifying the impacts of the pandemic. Women and girls, especially those with intersectional characteristics, are particularly disadvantaged during this crisis. Notwithstanding the strides that have been made by many countries on the continent to ensure gender equality and women's empowerment, the compounding effect of COVID-19 calls for the reprioritization of tangible interventions and the acceleration of the implementation of all legal instruments on gender equality and women's emancipation. We must continue to expand the programs and processes to accelerate women's participation in the supply chain value through preferential procurement in the public and private sector. As the Gauteng provincial government, we have developed policies for the empowerment of women, and we have adopted a women's charter which sets targets of 40% in the preferential procurement of goods and services in the province. All of our departments are expected to comply with this requirement. Women of our country no longer only face the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. They also face the often overlooked and underreported fourth challenge of gender-based violence. This is more so for the working class, underclass, and the peasant women of South Africa, whose constraining social circumstances often mitigate against speaking out against their plight. Survivors of gender-based violence here in our province have access to support and services, including the GBV hotline. They have access also to shelters and centers providing support to victims of sexual violence. The social security net has also been increased to protect vulnerable families, especially women and children, from the economic impact of the pandemic. We will continue to ensure that measures to protect and stimulate the economy are targeted at women. As the country works towards overcoming the social and economic fallout of COVID-19, we must ensure greater advancement of women. As we enter the decade of women's financial inclusion, women must form a central part of efforts to build more inclusive economies. Ka Sesotho we say, "Mme o tshwara thipa ka bohaleng." As we strive to lessen the impact of COVID-19, vaccination remains our most effective weapon in the fight against this virus. Bomme ke a kopa, kaofela a re yeng go ilo vaccinata. Makhosikazi, masibambeni ishisa, sehambe siyojova ukuze sizivikele kulesifo esidlangile, isifo esiwukhokhofu. Vaccines reduce the risk of severe disease and also hospitalization and death. And as from the 1st of September this year in 2021, we wish to urge and encourage all young women between the ages of 18 and 35 to also go and vaccinate. We also call upon the women to continue to register and to vaccinate. You can register online or via WhatsApp or via USSD or by calling the toll-free number of 0800 029 999. In addition, people can now simply present themselves at a vaccination site, even without any appointment. They will then be registered and be vaccinated. As women, we must also ensure that our families and our family members are also vaccinated. In conclusion, Program Director, I wish to quote our stalwart, Mme Charlotte Mateke, who said, I open quote, "Deal with it. You can't conquer what you can't confront," close quote. As we celebrate this year's Women's Day, we need to emulate the women of 1956 and commit ourselves to the struggle for the freedom of our women, the young women, and our girls. Ngalowo ngithi wathinta abafazi, wathinta ibokodo, ibambeni makhosikazi. Thank you very much, Program Director.